Just how powerful is the Sentry, and is his introduction a game changer for Doomsday and Secret Wars moving forward? Despite the Sentry only having a few minutes of screen time in the Thunderbolts before the Void breaks free, we got a glimpse into exactly why Val wanted the Sentry program to begin with, and why she wanted it to work so desperately. The Avengers are disbanded, and Val has taken it upon herself to create one supreme super being that can be dispatched at a moment's notice. He is described as a being stronger than all of the Avengers rolled into one, and even Bob calls himself out that the old Avengers roster included a god, so they speculate to just how powerful he really is. And in the comics, we have several interesting feats and points of comparison that we can highlight and point to, so come with us today, because that's exactly what we're going to do. And let's break down exactly how strong the Sentry really is. We can start with a few of his interactions with Thor, which is obviously a very good spot to start, many of which show that the two are comparable in strength, though as it currently stands, Thor has a winning record against Bob in the comics when the two come to blows. Thor's marginal superiority comes down to a combination of factors that aren't just limited to their respective strength though. The Sentry's most impressive performance against the God of Thunder came when he was resurrected by what is known as the Death Seed, and as a result, he had his power augmented even further than his default Sentry form. Before we dive too deeply into the Death Seed version though, let's first talk about the Sentry's default form to get to the point where we can compare the two actively. In the Dark Reign event, Norman Osborn collected an army that would lay siege to Asgard, and the Sentry was the chief among these forces. This story gives us some very good comparison points when we see the Sentry alongside some of the most notable and powerful Asgardians, and even once the Void is unleashed, Thor is able to beat the Sentry here. The two engage in a long and an arduous battle, but with the fate of his homeland now on the line, Thor pulls all of the stops until the Void is subdued, and even begging for death. As established, Thor has a winning record against the Sentry, but the Sentry is one of the only few heroes that can give Thor very many problems. So even though he has only beaten Thor a few times in the lore, he has earned respect. In the aftermath of this fight, however, we got to see just how powerful the character could theoretically become, because in this fight, Thor specifically killed the Void. The Death Seed version of this character represents Sentry's full potential, because after he was resurrected by the celestial technology, he became an official horseman of death itself. The secret to the Sentry's full power, however, is that this iteration of the character is no longer bound by his darker half, the Void. The Sentry and the Void are two halves of the same individual, and because of this, their power scales are proportional to one another. The more powerful one becomes, the more powerful the other becomes in turn. Because of this, Sentry is always holding himself back to keep the Void from getting stronger in turn. We have seen this happen multiple times when the Void breaks free of containment, and the Thunderbolts showed us just how quickly he can consume the entirety of New York City. When he was resurrected, however, he no longer needed to keep himself confined, since the Void was no longer a variable since it was killed by Thor, and the Sentry was finally able to cut loose. All too often, the Sentry is regarded as Marvel's iteration of Superman, and sometimes their power sets can get conflated. But this isn't entirely accurate. The Sentry actually boasts a much wider variety of abilities that aren't explored on the big screen, and very often in the comics as well. In the MCU, we get a glimpse of his molecular kinesis, the ability to quite literally warp the world around him. Often this outwardly resembles telekinesis, but he's used it to much more creative ways in the comics before. In the comics, Sentry was able to create a self-sufficient sand golems that were capable of wrestling a giant-sized wasp, and to create shields that were capable of stopping Mjolnir even after Thor threw the hammer at full force. In the MCU, we get to see a glimpse into these skills during his fight with the Thunderbolts, while he is still learning to use his abilities properly though. He also has an assortment of telekinetic and psionic abilities that allow him to infiltrate the minds of others, reading their memories, invading their subconsciousness, and manipulating them from the inside out. His capacity to harness solar energy is also on par with the sheer power output of the Odin Force, and we can make this claim by looking at the Absorbing Man, who was once able to absorb and harness the Odin Force for himself. However, when he attempted to absorb Bob Reynolds' solar energy, he was overloaded, which is evidence that there is much more raw power contained in the Sentry's body than there is perhaps in all of Odin's. All of this is to say that the Sentry is stacked with a very diverse power set that outclasses even other heroes in the Marvel Universe in his same category like Thor, but it's always the Void that will keep the Sentry in check. In the Thunderbolts or the New Avengers, we hear him outright say that he can't be the Sentry without also having the Void, so he has to be careful in live action just as he does in the comics. But again, Death Seed's Sentry does not have this problem. When he finally shed the looming shadow of the Void, Sentry was able to not just contend with Thor, but overpower him pretty handily. But what about the Void? We know Sentry is careful to maintain his power level, but the Void has no such reservations about keeping himself in check. So what about this version of the character? The Sentry's matter manipulation powers are a pale imitation of what the Void can do, because the Void has no restrictions whatsoever, and he is handily an Avengers level threat almost every single time. We know that the Sentry actually forged a strong friendship with the Hulk of all characters in the comics though, as they are two of the most powerful beings on the entirety of Earth. The Void, however, exists as a direct mirror to that of the Sentry, not just in terms of their powers, but with their morals and their ethics. If the Sentry cares for the Hulk, then the Void is committed to hating the Hulk for no other reason than to balance out the good with the bad. And because of this, the Void is actually one of the only characters that the Hulk is actively afraid of, and he has openly admitted to this. The Hulk knows the power that the Void commands, and this is a character who hates the Hulk with a burning passion. And so the Hulk's fear is fueled by a combination of sheer power that the Void commands, and the personal connection that he has with Bob. His power relies heavily on his own mental stability, both in the sense of his own mental fortitude, and simply being that he knows about his powers. Oftentimes even he himself does not know the limits of what the Sentry is capable of, and in some cases, he can only come to learn about entire power sets very late in life. This is why the Deathseed version of the character is so terrifying, because he is not only free of the Void, but he's much more well versed in all of his capabilities. In almost every single story involving the Sentry, the character has to be nerfed by his mental struggles. But this is one of the only few versions that really cuts loose. After a confrontation with Molecule Man of all beings, Reynolds began to understand that he could perform very similar feats without ever having known that he could before. This was the dawn of his molecular manipulation powers, and we can only guess how much stronger the Sentry became because of it, or what he's even capable of learning in the future. The Sentry's ability to rearrange matter on a molecular level wasn't in his base set, but it made him much stronger in the stories that followed. His nigh invulnerability and unmatched strength have allowed him to go toe-to-toe with the most dangerous threats in all of the multiverse, battling the likes of Galactus and the Hulk, and being able to hold his own. He has even ripped Ares, the literal god of war, in half. In the World War Hulk storyline is another one of his most impressive feats. At the time, Reynolds is in a frail mental state and slipping from control, faced with an enraged Hulk. The two titans nearly level the city as Sentry's powers were on the cusp of being completely out of control, and the fight eventually ends with a stalemate once they are both drained of all of their energy. But what's important to note is that while the Hulk was extremely powerful here, the Sentry was not actually at the height of his abilities. For years, the Sentry was a widely respected hero, a paragon of virtue, and was widely acclaimed in the superhero community as one of its best. If he had comparable strength to Thor and the Hulk, then it's all a matter of how stable his mental state is, and what this could mean for Doomsday and the future. What makes us concerned, however, is because we know Doom is coming, and he will need a show of power to establish himself as a true formidable threat. And the Sentry could be on the front lines of Doom's first attack. We know that the Fantastic Four were seen in the post-credit scene of the New Avengers, so we believe that Doom is not far behind. We've theorized before that the home reality of the Fantastic Four will be destroyed by the coming of Galactus, and that they will have to relocate to Earth 616 and the modern MCU, simply due to narratively how close Mr. Fantastic Reed and Doom are to one another, a rivalry maintained over a lifetime. This is all to say that if Earth 4 no longer exists, then the Fantastic Four may not be alone, and their welcoming party will probably be the New Avengers. They are already assembled and ready to act at a moment's notice, so even though Sam Wilson is building up his own roster of Avengers, Sam's team may still need some time, but the New Avengers can move as soon as they are needed. If the New Avengers are the first wave to meet Dr. Doom, and Dr. Doom needs to cement himself as a true threat though, then we can only wonder what could happen to Sentry once Doomsday begins. Showing that Doom is capable of taking down someone like the Sentry would be one of the fastest and the most effective ways to make an audience understand that he means business, and that Doomsday will have some very big stakes to settle. But anyway guys, what do you think of the Thunderbolts and the New Avengers, and what would you like to see from Sentry moving forward? Also, what do you think of Sentry's insane power, and how will he play in the future of the MCU? As always guys, smash that subscribe button for more Marvel lore, and have a great day.